The ring of fire, the wall in the north, and the armies of the end times. I have been thinking a lot lately, deeply, obsessively even, about things that most people would never think to connect. The ring of fire, the military forces concentrated in the Pacific, the great and mysterious fires that devastated Chicago, San Francisco, and London, the Great Wall of China, the real Vikings and their legends of monstrous beings from the far north, and, perhaps most importantly, the biblical prophecies found in the book of Revelation. The angels bound under the Euphrates River, the gathering of a 200 million strong army of fire-breathing creatures marching from the east toward Jerusalem in the last days. I've also looked into movies, Hollywood films, and series whose plots seem to echo and, in some ways, confirm these very ideas in ways that go far beyond coincidence. And guess what? They all somehow seem to be connected, woven together into one great spectacle, a pattern that stretches across the ages and reaches forward into the future. Now, everything I am about to present here is for the open-minded. This is for those who have been waking up over the past couple of years, those who have learned to see past the carefully constructed narratives we are being fed in every field imaginable: science, history, politics, entertainment, and religion itself. So, let's get to it. Part 1. The Nations United. A Common Enemy. For those who know, all the nations of the world are working together in one way or another. Behind the curtain of politics and so-called rivalries, countless treaties have been signed. Those who refuse to cooperate are dealt with, silenced, overthrown, or terminated. But beyond the treaties, there are agendas, and those agendas run on a tight schedule. This cooperation becomes especially evident when the world faces a common enemy. Perhaps you've seen the speeches, the clips of high-placed officials, former presidents, and military leaders who have openly mentioned aliens, extraterrestrial threats, or some unnamed common enemy. Their rhetoric always follows the same line. Would we not set aside our differences and unite in order to fight them?
I can't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species from another planet.
Ronald Reagan said it at the United Nations. Others have echoed it in various forms. The question is always framed as hypothetical, but is it really? This detail, this idea of a common enemy that forces the nations into unity, is in fact critically important for everything that follows, because as you may already know, everything in this world turns out to be twisted, a bit of truth wrapped in a great deal of lies. Part 2. The shape of the earth, truth, mixed with deception. The shape of our earth is one such twisted topic, debated throughout the day, every year. Globe or flat. Those who like to twist things present us with a globe earth. However, my belief is that the plane we live on is flat. The dome, the firmament, together with all that is beneath the earth, may form something that resembles a ball shape from a certain perspective. But it is presented to us in a deliberately misleading way, and this has kept mankind confused for centuries. And that is precisely what I mean when I say a bit of truth and a lot of lies mixed in. This distinction, the shape of our world, is not merely an academic debate. It has enormous implications for understanding geography, for understanding where armies can come from, for understanding what lies beyond the edges of our known continents, and for understanding biblical prophecy itself. Keep this in mind. It becomes essential. Part 3. The world is a stage. Countries appear to fight one another while secretly funding both sides of the conflict. The population is kept in a perpetual state of fear. Wars are manufactured. People are murdered by the millions, and all of it is supported and orchestrated by those who claim to be something they are not. The seed of the serpent, not the real Israel. The world rallies behind this Israel, the political, geopolitical entity. But this is not the biblical Israel. The true Israel, the covenant people of the Most High, is a subject for another time. But once you know, you know. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And this brings me back to the central point. The nations all work together, especially when facing a common enemy. So what is this enemy, and where does it come from? Part 4. The Ring of Fire. A wall across the Earth. The journey continues in the Pacific Ocean, in the Ring of Fire to be more precise. The Ring of Fire is a massive horseshoe-shaped zone of intense volcanic and seismic activity. It stretches over an area of approximately 40,000 kilometers, about 25,000 miles, running from the southern tip of South America up along the western coast of the Americas, across the Aleutian Islands near Alaska, and then sweeping down through Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, and all the way to New Zealand. Hundreds of active volcanoes, thousands of earthquakes every year, a zone of fire and fury that encircles a vast portion of the Pacific. But here is what caught my attention. When you look at the sheer concentration of military forces stationed in and around this zone, the picture changes dramatically. Many of the world's most powerful nations have the bulk of their active military forces deployed in this very area. The United States maintains enormous naval fleets and military bases across the Pacific, in Hawaii, Guam, Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. Japan maintains its self-defense forces in a state of constant readiness. South Korea keeps one of the largest standing armies in the world. China has been building up its navy at an unprecedented rate. Australia contributes significant forces. France maintains military assets in its Pacific territories. The Philippines, Indonesia, and numerous other nations contribute their own forces. But why? The official explanations, geopolitical tensions, trade route security, deterrence against one another, these are the reasons we are given. Country against country. Exercises and tests, saber rattling. But is that really what is going on there? Think about it. These nations that supposedly oppose each other have their forces concentrated in the same area, often cooperating behind the scenes in joint exercises, intelligence sharing, and coordinated patrols. They claim to be adversaries, yet they all face the same direction. That is not rivalry. That is a defensive line. Now here is where it gets truly fascinating. When you take the Ring of Fire, this massive arc of volcanoes and military forces, and you draw it on a flat Earth map, something remarkable happens. The horseshoe shape disappears. Instead, what you see is an almost straight line. A line stretching from the west all the way to the east, effectively blocking off the north. A wall. A wall of fire, volcanoes, warships, submarines, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and millions of troops, all positioned along what amounts to a single defensive barrier. In those waters, right now, as you hear these words, there are millions of troops and warships, submarines and airplanes, all standing ready to battle. But ready to battle what? Part 4b. The logos that confirm it. What is missing? And as if the maps and military positioning weren't enough evidence, there are even more clues, hidden in plain sight, as is so often the case. Let's take a look at a few particularly interesting logos from the world's most powerful international organizations. The United Nations, UN, logo. Take the logo of the United Nations, the UN, and examine it carefully. What do you see? A map of the world, but not just any map. It is an azimuthal equidistant projection, a flat Earth map with the North Pole at the center. The continents are arranged around this central point exactly as they appear on a flat Earth model. But now pay attention to the following detail. The top of the map and the north, the extreme north, is open. The map on the UN logo shows the known continents, but the north is not enclosed. There is no edge, no boundary, no definition of what lies there. It is open, as if something beyond it exists that must not be shown. And then the olive branches. 2 olive branches encircle the map, the universal symbol of peace. But look carefully. The olive branches enclose the map at the bottom and the sides. They come together at the top, but they do not close. The north is not included. Peace, so the logo seems to suggest, applies to the known world, to the continents we know. But the north falls outside that peace. The north is something else. The north is where peace does not reign. Is that not remarkable? The most powerful organization in the world, which claims to represent all nations, uses a flat Earth map as its logo, and leaves the north open, without peace, without protection. Now take the logo of the European Union, the circle of 12 golden stars on a blue field. At first glance, it appears to have nothing to do with geography. but rotate the logo so that the flag with the stars is at the top. Position it as a map with the north at the top. What you then see corresponds to what we see on the UN logo. The stars form a circle, a ring that encloses a central area, and just like the UN logo, the structure is elliptical. And here it becomes particularly interesting. Both the seats, the benches, the Sara of the European Parliament, and the olive branches of the UN are arranged in an elliptical shape. The elliptical shape that both the UN and the EU use in their structures and symbols is, if you follow the etymology, a shape that expresses deficit, a shape that says, here something is lacking, here something is incomplete, and when you look at what is missing on the maps and in the logos, the answer is always the same, the North. And these patterns are not limited to the UN and the EU. Take the logo of the World Health Organization. What do you see? Again, a map of the world in azimuthal projection, a flat Earth map set upside, with the North at the center, encircled by a wreath or ring. And again, the North is open, undefined, without closure. The same applies to the logo of the International Labor Bureau. The same structure, the same elliptical shapes, the same open space in the North, organization after organization, logo after logo, map after map. All of them use the flat Earth projection. All of them leave the North open. All of them use elliptical shapes, shapes that literally mean deficit or missing. Coincidence or message? Is this coincidence? Do all these powerful global organizations accidentally use the same map projection, a projection that corresponds to the flat Earth model? Do they accidentally all leave the North open? Do they accidentally use a shape whose name literally means something is missing? Or are they telling us, in plain sight, hidden behind symbols and etymology, exactly what they know, that the Earth is flat, that beyond the North something lies, and that what lies there does not belong to the peace represented by the olive branches? The North is missing. The North is open. The North is where the threat comes from. And now that we know this, let us return to the scriptures and look at what will precisely happen when that North opens up. Part 5. The Angels under the Euphrates, Biblical Prophecy. The scriptures provide an answer, one that most people have read without ever truly grasping its implications. In the book of Revelation, the Apostle John records a vision of catastrophic events that will unfold in the last days. Among the most terrifying of these is what happens when the sixth trumpet, the sixth shofar, is blown. Revelation 9:13-16 reads, "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000,000. And I heard the number of them, 200,000,000. That is 200 million. An army of 200 million, prepared for a specific hour, a specific day, a specific month, a specific year. And when they are released, their purpose is singular and devastating, to kill a third of mankind. But the description does not end there. John goes on to describe what he saw. Revelation 9:17-19. And thus I saw the horses, in this context, cavalry in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. Read that again carefully. These are not ordinary horses. These are not ordinary soldiers. These creatures have heads like lions. They breathe fire, smoke, and sulfur, brimstone from their mouths. Their tails are like serpents, snakes with heads, and those tails also inflict harm and death. On them sit riders, beings with breastplates of fire. This is an army of 200 million creatures that can only be described as monstrous, what the modern world would dismiss as mythical. Dragon-like beasts with serpent tails, breathing fire and sulfur, ridden by armored beings, marching with a single purpose. And they are coming from the east. Furthermore, when the sixth bowl of God's wrath is poured out, the way is prepared for them. Revelation 16:12. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. The Euphrates is dried up, the path is cleared. The kings of the east and their armies advance, but there is more. The gathering of armies from all directions is also prophesied. Revelation 27:9. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. The four corners of the earth. Not merely the four cardinal directions of our known continents. On a flat earth model, this takes on a profound and literal meaning. This is called the little season of Satan, the adversary, when he is released from his prison and goes out to deceive the nations at the four corners of the earth, gathering them for war. Part 6. The lands beyond what lies at the four corners. Now consider this. If the earth is flat, as described in Scripture and depicted on numerous historical maps, then the four corners of the earth refers to lands beyond our known continents. Take any flat earth map that is available to us, including, and especially, the historical ones. Consider the 1587 Urbano Monte World map, one of the largest and most detailed early maps ever created. It depicts the known world in a circular planispheric projection. But what is truly remarkable is what appears beyond the known continents, vast land masses, uncharted territories, and in those territories, the cartographers placed illustrations of creatures, beings that we would today call mythical, dragons, giants, sea monsters, beasts of every description. These were not merely decorative. The mapmakers were recording what was reported, what was believed, what was known to exist in the far reaches of the world. And this is an extraordinarily important detail, because the book of Revelation describes an army of 200 million creatures, creatures that breathe fire and sulfur, that have serpent tails with heads, that are ridden by armored beings. And these creatures are called forth from the four corners of the earth. These are the lands beyond our continents, the true north, the very south, the far east, and the far west. Regions that have been hidden from us, erased from our maps, declared non-existent by the very powers that patrol their borders, and all of them, all 200 million of these fire-breathing, sulfur-spewing, serpent-tailed creatures, are marching in one direction, toward Jerusalem, the very place that the nations of the world, acting in unison, defend by all means. Part 7. The Wall in the North. This is where the pieces begin to come together in a way that is difficult to dismiss. The wall in the north, whether it is the Ring of Fire, the military armada in the Pacific, or the ancient walls built by civilizations throughout history, has been placed there on purpose. Its function is singular, to try and stop an impending army that will destroy the self-proclaimed elite. The Bible makes clear that Jerusalem, specifically the corrupt, apostate Jerusalem that has aligned itself with the wickedness of the world, will ultimately be destroyed. Revelation 17:1-5. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and abominations of the earth. Revelation 17:16-17. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. The great whore, she who let herself in with the wickedness of the world, who rides the beast, who has made the kings of the earth drunk with her fornication, she will be destroyed, made desolate, burned with fire, and the very beast she rides will turn on her. This is Jerusalem, not the holy city of the Most High, but the corrupted counterfeit that has seated itself there. She will be destroyed, and no wall of fire, no ring of volcanoes, no armada of warships will save her. Part 8. The Real Vikings and the Jotnar, Giants from the Far North. Now let us turn to the Norse, the real Vikings, the Scandinavians, and their ancient traditions. The Scandinavian peoples always spoke of their deities: Thor, the thunder god; Odin, the Allfather; Freya, the goddess of love and war; and of the great battles that would come at the end of the age, what they called Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. But among the most significant figures in Norse mythology are the Jotnar, the giants. The Jotnar were not merely large humans. They were colossal, terrifying, elemental beings, forces of chaos and destruction. And according to Norse tradition, they came from the far north, specifically from a realm called Jotunheimr, the world of the giants, a frozen, vast, distant land far beyond the reach of men. On a flat Earth model, the far north takes on an entirely new significance. It is not merely the Arctic Circle or Scandinavia. It is beyond the known world, beyond the ice, beyond whatever barriers have been placed to keep mankind from venturing further. The Vikings knew this. Their legends speak of it. The giants, the Jotnar, would come from those far northern lands in a great final battle, bringing destruction upon the world of gods and men alike. And when we look at Scripture, the parallel is unmistakable. The armies described in the book of Revelation, the 200 million fire-breathing creatures and their riders, will be coming from the far north, from the four corners of the earth, from lands beyond what we know. The Norse called it Ragnarök. The Bible calls it the Battle of Gog and Magog. The details differ in form, but the substance is remarkably similar. An overwhelming army of monstrous beings coming from the far reaches of the earth, advancing to destroy the kingdoms of the known world. Part 9. The movies that confirm the pattern. And this is where it becomes truly uncanny. Because Hollywood, whether by design, by inspiration, or by a spiritual compulsion to tell the truth through fiction, has been telling this exact same story over and over again. Let me walk you through the films and series that echo this narrative with astonishing precision. The Great Wall, 2016. Directed by Zhang Yimou and starring Matt Damon, The Great Wall is set in medieval China and presents a fictionalized account of why the Great Wall of China was built. But the reason given in this film is not to keep out rival armies or nomadic tribes. In the movie, the Great Wall was built to stop the Tao Te, an innumerable horde of monstrous, dragon-like creatures that emerge from the far north every 60 years. The Chinese military, known as the Nameless Order, has been preparing for 60 years to face this onslaught. They have trained relentlessly, built their defenses, and readied every weapon they have, all for one purpose: to survive the next attack. The Tao Te are vicious, reptilian beasts, green-scaled, swarming, utterly relentless. They move as one because they are controlled by a queen, a single leader who commands the entire horde. The queen feeds off her own beasts and off everything else that is brought to her. She is the brain, the nerve center, the commander. Kill the queen and the army falls. Now here is what makes this film extraordinary in the context of everything we have been discussing. First, a great wall built specifically to stop an army of monsters from the north. This mirrors the idea that the Ring of Fire and the military forces in the Pacific serve as a defensive barrier against something coming from beyond the known world. Second, the creatures are innumerable, monstrous and led by a central authority. This mirrors the 200 million creatures of Revelation and the spiritual forces, the fallen angels, Satan himself, who command them. Third, and this is where my jaw dropped. At one point in the movie, a ring of fire is specifically mentioned. The defenders attempt to use fire as a barrier against the creatures. A ring of fire in a movie about a great wall defending against monsters from the north. What are the odds? All the ingredients of this theory are right there in one film. A great wall, an army of monsters with a leader coming from the north, and a ring of fire. And fourth, the fire does not stop them. The Tao Te adapt. They push through. The ring of fire slows them, but does not defeat them. This detail alone is staggering in its implications. Could this imply that the ring of fire, the volcanic barrier, and the military forces arrayed along it will not stop the army coming from the north? Outlander, 2008. Not to be confused with the television series about time travel, Outlander is a 2008 science fiction film starring Jim Caviezel. In this film, a man crashes on Earth during the Viking Age in Norway. He brings with him, inadvertently, a terrifying creature called a Morwen, a bioluminescent dragon-like predator of extraordinary power and ferocity. What is particularly relevant to our discussion is this: the Morwen cannot be destroyed by fire. The Vikings attempt to use fire against it, as one would naturally do against any beast, and it is utterly ineffective. The creature is immune to fire. It passes through flames as though they were nothing. This echoes the same theme we see in the Great Wall. Fire, the most primal weapon of defense, the very thing that the Ring of Fire represents, is insufficient to stop these creatures. If the fire-breathing creatures of Revelation are themselves born of fire and sulfur, it stands to reason that fire would be no weapon against them. You cannot burn what is already made of flame. Could this be telling us that the Ring of Fire, the volcanic barrier, the wall of flame, will not stop the army from the north? That it was never going to be enough? Game of Thrones, 2011 to 2019. Perhaps no modern story has embedded this narrative more deeply into popular culture than Game of Thrones, the HBO series based on George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. The entire series revolves around a singular looming threat: the army of the dead, the White Walkers, and their white soldiers, amassing in the far north beyond the wall. The wall in Game of Thrones is an enormous structure of ice stretching across the entire northern border of the Seven Kingdoms. It is 700 feet tall and hundreds of miles long. It was built thousands of years ago by an ancient order specifically to keep out the monstrous forces of the far north, beings that are not human, that command armies of the dead, that bring with them an eternal winter. The Night's Watch, a sworn brotherhood, mans this wall, watching and waiting for the return of a threat that most of the world has dismissed as myth and legend. Sound familiar? A defensive barrier in the north, a military order dedicated to holding the line, a world that has forgotten, or chosen to ignore, the reality of the threat. And when the wall finally falls, the army of the dead pours through, nearly unstoppable, marching south to destroy the world of the living. The parallels to our discussion are almost too precise to be coincidental. A wall in the north, an inhuman army beyond it, a world that doesn't believe until it's too late, and a wall that ultimately fails. How to Train Your Dragon, 2010 to 2019. Even in animated films aimed at children, the pattern persists. In How to Train Your Dragon, the Viking village of Berk is under constant siege from dragons, powerful, fire-breathing creatures that attack from beyond the known world. The Vikings build defenses. They train warriors. They develop weapons. Their entire culture is organized around one thing: surviving the dragon attacks. But here is the key detail. In the first film, it is revealed that the dragons are not attacking of their own free will. They are controlled by a massive alpha dragon, the Red Death, a colossal queen-like creature that lives in a volcanic nest and forces all the other dragons to bring her food. If they fail, she devours them. Again, a great leader, a queen commanding an army of fire-breathing creatures, an army that attacks from beyond the borders of the known world, a civilization that builds walls and trains warriors to defend against them. The echoes of Revelation and of the Great Wall are unmistakable. The Lord of the Rings, 2001 to 2003. And then there is Tolkien's masterwork, The Lord of the Rings, perhaps the most beloved fantasy epic ever created. In Tolkien's world, the free peoples live in Middle-earth, the Middle Lands, the known world, the center. Our continents on a flat Earth map can be compared to Middle-earth in precisely this way. We are in the center, surrounded by lands beyond. And in the story, what happens? The dark forces, Sauron, the Dark Lord, gathers his armies from all corners of Middle-earth and beyond. Orcs, trolls, Easterlings, Haradrim, corsairs, monstrous beasts, all converging, all uniting under one dark authority, all marching toward the kingdoms of men with the singular purpose of destroying them. The parallels to Revelation 27-9 are striking. Satan is released. He goes out to the four corners of the earth. He gathers the nations, Gog and Magog, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They march across the breadth of the earth. They surround the camp of the saints in the beloved city. Middle-earth is our earth. The dark forces beyond its borders are the armies of the four corners. The beloved city is Jerusalem, and the Dark Lord is the adversary himself. Tolkien, a devout Catholic, knew his scripture. Whether he intended it consciously or not, his story is a reflection of the biblical narrative of the end times. Part 10. The Great Wall of China, Facing the Wrong Direction. Now, with all of this in mind, consider a detail about the Great Wall of China that has puzzled researchers for years. The Great Wall's defensive features, its battlements, its watchtowers, its arrow slits, in many sections face north. This is the standard explanation. The wall was built to defend against northern invaders, Mongol tribes, nomadic peoples from the steppes. But some have observed that certain design elements suggest the wall was also meant to defend against something coming from the north toward China, meaning the wall faces into China in ways that seem counterintuitive if the only threat were northern nomads attacking southward. Could it be that the Great Wall of China was built not merely to stop human armies, but to serve as a barrier against something else entirely? Something coming from the true north, from lands beyond what we are told exists? On a flat Earth model, China sits south of the great northern expanse. The wall faces north, toward the unknown, toward the lands from which the Jötnar came, toward the lands from which the 200 million will march. Part 11. The Great Fires. Invasions from the north? And now we come to one of the most provocative questions of all. The Great Fires of history, the Great Fire of London in 1666, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, the San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906. These catastrophic events destroyed vast portions of major cities, leaving behind devastation on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. The official explanations are familiar. A bakery on Pudding Lane, Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern, an earthquake rupturing gas lines. Simple, accidental causes for apocalyptic destruction. But what if these explanations are covers? What if these great fires were not accidents at all? Consider the aftermath of these events. In each case, entire cities were leveled. Magnificent architecture, buildings of a quality and grandeur that some argue the civilizations of the time could not have built, was reduced to rubble and ash. And in the rebuilding, the old world was erased and replaced with something new, something controlled. What if these fires were caused by invading forces from the far north? Armies, or raiding parties, of fire-breathing creatures and their riders, descending upon the cities of men, destroying everything, and taking the loot back to their lands beyond the borders of the known world? Before the modern military buildup, before the nations united their forces along the Ring of Fire, there would not have been enough manpower to stop such invasions. Individual cities, individual nations, would have been defenseless against an onslaught of fire and fury from creatures that cannot be killed by conventional means. Is this why the nations are now working together? Is this why millions of troops are stationed along the northern barrier? Is this why the Ring of Fire is patrolled by the combined naval might of a dozen nations? Not to fight each other for nativity, but to defend against what comes from the north? Part 12. They will not be stopped. And yet, and here is the most sobering truth of all, they will not be stopped. The Bible is clear. The fire will not stop them. The wall will not stop them. The armies of the nations will not stop them. Revelation 9:18. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. A third of mankind will perish. The 200 million will march. The Euphrates will dry up. The kings of the east will advance, and Jerusalem, the great whore, Babylon the Great, will burn. No ring of fire, no great wall, no armada, no nuclear arsenal. Nothing that man can build or deploy will be sufficient to stop what the Most High has decreed. And yet, in the modern age, questions linger. Organizations like NASA receive tens of billions in funding every year. Vast resources, justified in the name of exploration. But to some, the scale raises deeper questions. What if part of that effort is not only directed upward, but outward? What if it is meant to monitor, maintain, or even reinforce boundaries unseen? If there is a boundary across the Pacific, a barrier between worlds or realms, it would require constant strengthening. And if so, where does that funding truly go? The oceans themselves seem restless. Tsunamis rise without warning, with devastating force. But Scripture has already established the truth concerning the seas. Jeremiah 5:22. Do you not fear me? Declares Adonai. Do you not tremble before me? I placed the sand as a boundary for the sea, an everlasting decree that it cannot pass. Though the waves toss, they cannot prevail. Though they roar, they cannot pass over it. Job 38:10-11. When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no farther, here is where your proud waves halt. Proverbs 8:29. When he gave to the sea its boundary so the waters would not transgress his command. The boundary is set, the decree is established, the waters do not move beyond what has been commanded. Therefore, tsunamis are not random disasters sent without order. They are not chaos breaking loose against creation. They do not contradict the command of the Most High. They occur within what has been permitted. And this leaves only one conclusion. They are either brought about by the hand of man, or they are the result of conflict beyond what is seen, responses from the north, from forces that move when they are stirred. Even the history of nuclear testing bears witness. Massive detonations beneath the sea, officially declared as experiments. Yet their scale suggests something more. Strikes, perhaps, directed not at emptiness, but at something beneath, at forces waiting in the depths. One thing is certain, the waves are not without cause. The films show it. The Great Wall shows the creatures adapting, breaking through. Outlander shows the beast immune to fire. Game of Thrones shows the wall falling. The Lord of the Rings shows the dark armies overwhelming the defenses of men. They are telling us. Whether they know it or not, whether Hollywood intends it or not, they are telling the truth through fiction. The wall will fall. Earthly fire will not hold. The army will come. And yet, this is not the end for all. For those who trust in the Most High, who walk in his ways, who remain steadfast and faithful, there is hope even in the final hour. The same writings that speak of judgment also speak of preservation, of deliverance, of a people who are not abandoned in the midst of chaos. Even the stories of men echo this truth. In a few among many, amidst the destruction and the fall of kingdoms, a remnant remains. A small number endures, not by strength, not by walls, not by weapons, but by faith, by calling, by something set apart. So it is written, so it will be. Though the armies rise, though the earth trembles, though the nations fall, those who belong to the Most High are not without hope. For in the end, it is not destruction that has the final word, but the will of the Almighty and the preservation of those who are His.